Hey everybody, welcome. Okay, we're going to get started in just a few minutes here. Just to let everyone know, just because there's going to be a lot of people here, we're going to put everyone on mutes, and we're going to have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar here. So we'll get started in about 3 minutes. My calculator. All right, welcome. Good morning, everybody, to the
It's a beautiful day here at the University of Florida in the Loss Prevention Research Council's Innovation Lab, and our team's here as well. And no, they're not wearing lab coats this morning. So what we're doing is going to do a quick discussion about the problem-solving method called SARA. And in criminology field, SARA is the most commonly used problem-solving method, and it's a pretty simple method, and it's something that can be used regardless of the complexity or the size and scale of your problem. And so many U.S. retailers via the LPRC have started to use this method, and in fact, quite a few have requested that we put this webinar out to give a brief explanation. But what I'm going to do is go through some slides that we have for students at the University of Florida that are studying crime prevention, crime control, and use that. We'll have a real-world case study, and we'll start off here with a little bit of video. But we've got, close to 60 or 70 participants all around the United States. So welcome everybody to the LPRC. So the first thing we'll do is let's see if we can make our technology work here. Every business obviously has problems, whether we're talking about shoplifting and whether it's self-use type shoplifting or it's some kind of convert to cash shoplifting issue. Here you see some examples of that with different boosters. We've got employee dishonesty, of course, a major issue for us. And in fact, we had a call yesterday on planning some new research on that very topic, and we'll release that later. Parking lot crime, a huge area of interest now for retailers who are looking to make their places of business safer, more secure. Again, as you all have heard us talk about, if you may have the greatest merchandise in the world, you've got a great interior and shopping experience lined up, but if people don't feel safe, they're not going to come there. Obviously, burglary, armed robbery, issues that we're currently working on at the LPRC with multiple retailers, all present problems, and as part of the problem solving, we're using the SARA method. And then finally, we end up here again with the sort of a boosting situation over in another town here in Gainesville, in the state of Florida, called Tallahassee. So having said that, what we'll do is we're going to roll forward and get on with our show. Okay, so what we're going to talk about with the SARA method is how we use it. How do you use it? SARA was developed by Professor Eck, now at the University of Cincinnati, primarily with the grant and part of his research for the U.S. Department of Justice, helping law enforcement agencies, in particular through problem-oriented policing, help them get more focused, help them measure what they're doing to see if it's working, how do they adjust that. But there are so many problem-solving methods out there, and many of you have some that you use that are very, very complicated, very complex. And so the law enforcement agencies wanted something very simple that they could use, again, for big and small, medium-sized problems. And so we have adopted that here at LPRC and in our teaching and research at the University of Florida. So that's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing, the SARA method, the SARA process, it's some very simple components. We're first going to scan for an issue. We're going to conduct some deep dives on that information. What can we find out about it through our analysis? Once we find out specific things like the mechanisms about how this problem is happening, we're going to then tailor, in other words, prescribe a very specific response or set of responses. Instead of just doing stuff, our analysis has showed us some opportunities, some angles, some things that we can work on here. So that's what we're going to respond to. And then we're going to assess, hey, how well did we execute? How did we roll it out? What are opportunities to adjust? And of course, most importantly, was there an impact that we were looking for here? Did we get the impact we were shooting for? And so it's a cycle. And so look at the scan, identifying recurring problems, prioritizing those problems, developing broad goals. Hey, I want to have this happen. I want to see fewer returns in the abuse area or in the fraud area. I want to see less impact. I want to see more net sales come out of this, and so on. Confirm those problems exist, or that the causes of those problems exist as a part of the SARA method. Of course, the most important we're going to go through in the analysis phase is going to be determine how often this occurs, how long has this been occurring, how widespread is this problem, and so on. And then we're going to select these problems that have come up on our radar screen for a little more in-depth dive here. Here's how we're going to look at the analyzing. We're going to look at those loss events that we've got, the number and the types of loss, whether it's merchandise or supplies, equipment, information. It could be brand issues, it could be cash and other negotiables. Of course, we're going to look at the patterns, we're going to look at trends, we're going to see, are there repeat victims here? Victimization is huge. Are there certain locations that are having more than one incident? In the robbery project we're working on with CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens, and now with some other retailers, we're looking at 3.5 years of robbery event data, but we're looking most importantly, what locations that have similar risk scores, CAP index or otherwise, that have never been hit compared to those that have had one hit, and then of course compared to those that have had multiple strikes. And so we want to look at repeat victimization is a huge variable to look at here. The assets involved, the offenders involved. Are there some common patterns, some things about the offenders involved? We're going to map these things geographically and temporally. We want to see time and space, what's going on. And I just mentioned with repeat locations, is there an interstate tie-in or some mass transit stop, or is there some neighborhood or complex? Is there something going on that might drive why this location is more repeatedly victimized than another one, for instance? Or at certain times, why are these things happening at this time and location, and so on? So what's the proximity to other locations? There's been some good research on place and crime, what role place plays in crime, and its proximity, that location, whether it's never been victimized or once or repeatedly. How close is it to a mall or a liquor store or a gang hangout or something else, a school, a high school, whatever it might be? So those are some of the things we're looking at as part of our analysis. We're going to consult people out in the field who are familiar with the problem, or at least think they are. They're exposed to it anyway. How about that? Whether it's law enforcement, whether it's mall or lot security, other business owners, managers in the area, of course our own people, both managers and employees, especially LP or AP. We want to look at the different levels and strata. They might have different perspectives. And it's amazing, and many of you or most of you know this, when you get out and talk to people, what you can find out. But there is a lot of opportunity here to look at these things. We're going to look at map recons. We're going to look through Google Earth and so on to get an idea of what's going on around the area. We're going to review event reports. What happened, what took place here. And I can tell you, and of course Stephanie and our team can definitely tell you, after looking through literally thousands of robbery, other violent crime incidents or events from multiple retailers, it's interesting what you can pick up, but even almost scary what you won't see because it's not in those reports. And so, as you all know that are in some of our working groups here, we're always harping on, look, the type of data you collect is important. And so we have these C's, are you collecting what you need to be collecting? Is it complete? Are you collecting all the information from all the locations or incidents? And is it coded properly to use? Numbering is huge. We have to have numerical coding to use any type of statistics, to do anything to look for correlations or changes and things like that. And so recoding is events. And the big example we keep rolling out there, and you're going to see an impact and so on, in robbery events at the pharmacy counter, how many times the robber jumps over the counter, but also at front end or cash register robberies, the same things. But we rarely ever see that fact pointed out in the reporting, whether it's in the narrative, and certainly not coded out if the person did that. So only through reviewing the video of a lot of the incidents or events are we determining that. So looking at reports, but what's in the reports, how usable is that? Surveying your employees. We all know there are attitudinal surveys you can put out there, self-report, or report on your buddy type surveys that can help you guys keep an idea about what's going on in your locations, but having them kind of fill in the blanks. You may have had incidents or events or problems that didn't come up through some other source. And even in this robbery case, we're finding where some robberies are never reported to the corporate office but we're finding them in social media or through employees in the store saying, yeah, this is the third time. We're like, wait a minute, third time, we only see 2 incidents reported. Of course, hotline calls and other anonymous reporting can be helpful. Reviewing audits where your team or internal audit or district managers are going out, clearly they can pick up things that are very useful to help us identify and understand what's going on. Clearly, your people going into stores and DCs and office environments to meet with your people, listen to them, talk with them. It's amazing what they will bring up and help us understand here. We mentioned social media. Social media is very vital. We see even in mainstream reporters now, the first thing they do is they tweet out what's going on before they even report to their own employer, whether it be a broadcast or in print. And so the same thing with our own people. And example we heard the other day during the robbery project was where one particular retailer had learned about a car fully engulfed in flames that had been set by somebody in their parking lot. But the manager of that particular drugstore location and their team had no idea that this car was fully engulfed in flames. But through social media and somebody taking a selfie of themselves by a burning car, put them onto it. Consulting groups and other organizations may bring this up or point out issues you've got. And of course, media coverage and editorials we see in the D&D and the LP Magazine and other reporting sources now where they're compiling media coverage, and there are retailers that have actually found out about issues or more about issues, or that their fellow businesses or their competing business partners are experiencing the same type of issue near them. And of course, vendor reporting, whether it's the vendors of your products, the delivery people, or of course your solution partners that might say, hey, I'm hearing this in another retailer, are you hearing it? No. All right. Identifying the stakeholders is always critical. You know, local and district leaders, if you're going to solve a problem, we all know we can't do that in isolation. We've got to have everybody involved that should be involved. The victims, in other words, the store or the employees, or might be shoppers or customers. And we could be talking about bad checks. We could be talking about online fraud. We could be talking about any of the issues we saw in the video. They're all problems. Neighbors and coworkers. The other day we were up in Atlanta. We were visiting supermarket stores that were very high risk and high incident locations, triggering events, the terms that you all are using out there now. And we went out and talked to neighbors, looked at neighborhoods, look at the paths between surrounding apartment complexes or neighborhoods leading to that location. And then what was often ditches and so on by there, whether it be shopping carts or merchandise or burglary tools, all kind of things that you could see in the weeds and right in that area. So identifying the victims and the people that might have information could put you on a problem. The agencies that have control over the offenders, during the visits in Atlanta, we met with law enforcement. It turned out that these agencies were very engaging, both patrol and criminal investigation division, CID, and we didn't get a chance to talk with crime analysis or prevention, but those two parts of the agencies were very involved. Other establishments, again, that are impacted by this. If we see a phone store that's a reseller, go over and talk to them. What are they experiencing, or vice versa to the other location. Mail carriers, mall center operators, and so on, all are impacted. All may be sources of information intelligence for you. National organizations, you're going to see it impact. We're going to go through robbery, and one part is the pharmacy. One professor will be coming in, working with us at Impact from currently at Colorado State, Dr. Shelley, but she'll be going through how she's working with different data sets or databases and how they're each kind of telling a different part of the story. Some are more complete and so on than others. But national organizations, insurance reporting groups and so on can be helpful. Obviously, you mentioned store operations through audits and conversations, supply chain. Are they getting kickbacks and other things that we should know about? Obviously, IT, the store design people, the buyers or merchants, and so on. Now we're going to move into second A, analysis, or the first A, analysis, identifying and understanding the events. Now we're going to do the deep dive. We've identified the problem. We've identified intelligence and information, problem-solving partners and sources. Now we're going to start to do that. We're going to understand these events. How are they starting? How are they continuing? What can we do to find out more about them? So how can we better detect these things? How can we better define them, and then how can we document it? Where's the documentation? All leading towards solving the problem. In other words, the first D, deterrence. So what's preceding and accompanying that issue? We're going to identify the relevant data, some that we did before, some now. We're going to research what's known about the problem. What do we already know or others know? What do our partners know, other retailers? We're benchmarking, we're picking their brains. Bear in mind, some of them are just as naive or it's new to them as others. So we want to look always at any data source with a skeptical eye. That's part of critical thinking, and that's something that we always recommend. Taking inventory of how the problem is being addressed currently. Is there something already being done by you, your organization, somebody else in the organization, or other companies or similar? They're in similar situations. Again, may not be the right thing or may not be the right way, but it's something you want to take a look at. Part of the analysis as well. Now we can start narrowing the scope down. If we're talking about robbery, we're talking about commercial robbery where the store or the location is the victim, or are we talking about personal robbery where your customers or employees are somehow victimized on your property? If it's commercial, is it a front-end cash type robbery where it's a cash and dash? Look at the offenders and so on. We're now starting to diagnose here, but we want to understand those issues pretty well. Is it pharmacy? If it's pharmacy, is it for pharmacy self-use of the product, or is this a takedown? So now we're looking at higher order offenders with pre-incident indicators, and there's a little bit of planning and so on, more weaponry involved. Those are things we want to look at. So now it's cash, it's the front end primarily, it's register to, it's during these certain hours, and there are certain indicators, pre-incident indicators or pre-event indicators, and so on. We're trying to identify the source that can help us get a deeper understanding. We want to know the causal mechanisms, what is creating the issue. We're closer to this bus stop or mass transit than another location that's only had one or none. This seems to be generating the problem. It seems to be at certain time periods. Are there things that we can do now based on we're starting to understand the problem a little bit? We can be more specific in our response, more targeted. Developing a working hypothesis now. There's nothing wrong with saying, all right, based on now, I've reviewed all these sources. I'm starting to have a picture here of what's going on. And so I think this is going to be what's my recommendations based on that. And so we want to know, is this really occurring? And if so, this seems to be what's happening. Sometimes we overlook certain things. Sometimes it just seems like it appears obvious at first glance. It's not really. I think humans were sort of wired that way to jump on the first thing. We don't have to be too deliberative here. Deliberative if people are being injured and we're having a big problem, but we need to be a little deliberative and think about these things a little more deeply. And so look at it beyond the first glance. Take a second and third look through all your different sources. Are they coming together? Is there some sort of validity that's telling the same story here? And so there may be some tremendous internal external pressure to quickly solve the problem. We see it with law enforcement. We've got a serial burglar, robber, rapist, killer. Get it solved and solve it now. But all of us are familiar with situations like that in our own organizations or our communities where if we really would take a step back, collect all the information. And one thing that's relevant to me right now, and look at the latest terrorist attack in Orlando. Why did Orlando Police and Orange County Sheriffs wait so long, their SWAT team, to go in? Well, they waited about 3 hours or so, about 90 minutes. During that time, they're collecting intelligence, trying to understand the layout of the building. They're trying to get some sound and some hidden CCTV in there to get an idea of what's going on. They're waiting for their teams to arrive. The SWAT people have to gear up and respond. They have to have a plan. They've got to figure out how to execute that plan. They need a plan B, a C, a D. They've got to get medical rescue people in place in case things don't go right, and on and on. So we want to take a little bit in 90 minutes, 3 hours, whatever, sometimes isn't as big a deal. It's tough. It's tough, I know, for all of us to do it, but sometimes we need to be a little more purposeful in what we do, take a little more time. And so we got to watch for this pressure, and these are why sometimes things are overlooked or skipped as part of the process. We don't want to have paralysis by analysis. SARA is not designed to do that, but it's designed to give all of us a better look, to prioritize things a little better, to get much more definition around the issue, so our response is more targeted and effective. Sometimes this doesn't seem like real LP or AP work, and so we might overlook something, but I think many of us know of examples now where something looks to be an IT problem or a supply chain problem or a store operator problem or a merchant's issue, but in reality, maybe it's a red flag. It's something that we should be involved in. It could lead to other things, and so they want us to get involved. Supervisors don't like the analytical work that takes that time. We mentioned that earlier, but they don't sometimes produce apprehensions and cases and things that were traditional measures of our impact. And they're still measures, but they're probably not the best measures, certainly not of deterrence, even though they ultimately can sometimes lead to that. But LP leaders sometimes don't want analysis around other things. It doesn't seem like it's real LP. It doesn't always lead to immediate impact measures, but it can lead to impact on things that really matter. You have to have a strong commitment to the old ways, but also to the new ways as well, to being open-minded. There are no sacred cows. So we want to take a look. We want to understand the problem better. The resources, we mentioned some of these. We've got crime analysts that are inside the organization or out. Law enforcement's got them. The retailers have them you can take advantage of. Our team at the LPRC can help out. We know that with report writing software, there are ways for you to collect more complete pictures of what's going on, so you have much better information to analyze, that you can now define things better for more specific action. We mentioned mapping and geographic systems. It can give you much more of a visual look at things that are happening in place and time, and discriminate between, again, locations that are having issues and those that aren't, regardless of if it's a bad check or a fraud or a tax, and so on. Technical assistance. It may be something where you need somebody to help you with your surveillance equipment or an analysis, or it depends on what you're talking about. Manager employee surveys, we mentioned before, can be very helpful in finding problems on the S part, the scan, as well as on the assessment or analysis part. Interviews with the victims and offenders can really help fill in blanks. You know that at the LPRC, it's a huge way that we do that. And then systems that will help you identify repeat victimization. Training can be huge on how to collect and how to make sense of the world, how to use that and tease out the things that are most important. Clearly, newfangled technology like laptops can help. Online services, as we mentioned before, great sources of finding the problem, but helping as well to define the issue. Next, we get to the R, response. Now we're going to respond in a very targeted way because our analysis has pointed that out for us. You know what? This domino is the first one to fall. That caused the second domino to fall, and so on. So what can I do to create a more difficult situation for the first one to go, the second, and so on? Brainstorm. You're looking at the pictures, mapping, and the data analysis, and sources, and interviews, and so on. Hey, quickly, what can we do? Break it out in stages of what happened. In the robbery project, as you all know, many of you know, we've broken out the robbery into 5 stages of a robbery. What can we do before they leave the house? As they're in transit, as they enter the location, as they move through the location, as they commence the act, as they commit the act, and so on. In the aftermath, what are precise interventions for each point based on what our initial analysis showed? Searching for what other organizations are doing. Again, benchmarking is always recommended, but is never recommended as the only thing that we do. Many retailers that are benchmarked against, that are held up in high regard, should be, but those same retailers will tell us offline, we are still learning, we are still trying to get better, we don't have all the answers, maybe not even a lot of them sometimes, so there's always that cautionary tale that we've all seen when we benchmark against somebody that may not have a better handle on the situation than we do. You may have some alternatives here. Hey, we could do this or that for stage 1, or this or this or that. We may have 3 or 4 options. What's the most indicated? Where do we start first? What's the target plan? And I mentioned, like in the Orlando situation, okay, if we can't breach the wall, what else could we do? If we breach the wall, but it's only a partial breach, if we breach it all the way, if the person's not in the restroom anymore or the bathroom, they moved here, and if there are actually 2 shooters, if the shooter's does have an explosive device or doesn't, and on and on. What's in the background as we're moving toward the subject? What if nobody's there, somebody's there, a lot of people are there, and so on. Start the specific objectives, stating those. So what's our response plan? What are we trying to achieve here in plan A, B, C? And then how are we going to carry this thing out? And then we've got to actually execute the response. Some of the reminders on the response, they should be directly linked to the results of our analysis. Now you can show a one-to-one tie-in. I think at stage 2, if they're committing some sort of pre-event surveillance or scouting mission, or they're recruiting people online and I pick this up, what can I do to interfere with that process, to detect that process, to better define that, to get an idea who's coming our way and so on. What can I do at stage 3 and 4 and 5? Don't just limit the responses to LP. I mentioned again in the robbery or the situation, SARA in Orlando, what are medical things we need to do? What are counseling things? What are things we need to do with the media to address this or that? And then in the aftermath, as the media starts bringing in so-called experts from every angle to, well, what about this? Why did that happen? Why didn't this happen? How are we going to respond to these things? Responses should be manageable, and we can't have something that's so blue sky that it's not scalable, much less implementable, and things like that. And then even with the timing, could we really deploy this in time, and so forth. Always look at the variety you've got. Look at the side effects. What are things that we could do singularly or in packages? The last part, the last A assessment, hey, you know what, we found the problem, we analyzed and tried to define it the best we could. We tried to align some responses. We've executed that response. How did we do? How did we do in executing? How did we do in our planning? How did we do in the impact that we created here? What are the adjustments to be made? So we're going to collect information from before and after the incident and our response to that situation. We're going to look at determining whether and how well the plan was implemented by us, whether our goals and objectives were attained, both in the planning, in the analysis, the planning, the execution, and the results, the effects that we saw. Did we find negative side effects we didn't plan for, or good side effects we didn't plan for, or neutral ones? What are some new strategies that we should look at now? What are adjustments to be made? How can we do this better, both in the detection and the analysis, the planning and response, the execution of that response, and then doing an ongoing assessment? How do we set this up? We can have positive effects, reduction or elimination of the problem, fewer incidents, for example, or less loss per incident, less serious incidents. Maybe we displace the criminal. They're no longer robbing us at the front end. Now they're coming in and taking energy drinks or something like that. Still an issue to be dealt with, but we've displaced it by target and intensity. Better handling of the incidents. Again, how do we do that? How do we improve that? But maybe we improve through this analysis process. How do we remove this problem from our priorities? Did we in fact do that? Did we find a diffusion of benefits? That's the halo effect. Did we find some positive effects here? Wow, we put infant formula in these new special keepers. We found lower loss levels, a little higher on-shelf availability and sales, positive responses, but we also found in surveying our customers before and after, they felt a little more secure that maybe this wasn't tampered with. That's not something we planned for. So here we are. We've got a scanning, analysis, response, and assessment. SARA is our model. It can be used in anything that we're dealing with in any way. But don't look at it as a linear process. It is an overall process. It's feeding on itself. We're moving constantly through the scan, analysis, response, and assessment models or phases. We're feeding off each other, and now through your individuals, if you've got district LP or AP managers out there, even store level AP or LP, regional group, and on, all the way up through the corporate office, really you should be out there constantly scanning, picking up things, doing quick analysis about the best solutions. You're responding, you're assessing. And if people are asking you, hey, I need this, I want more cameras, I want more people, I want more of this, you know what? I want a 1-page or 2-page summary. I want to see you put a SARA model together. We're seeing more retailers do that. So just look at that, the assessment, the scan, and so on. So what's the problem? What's the contribution, or what's contributing to that issue? What are specific responses? Did the response work? So always look at this collaboratively. It's systematic. It's ongoing. It's not linear, and so on. So at this point, I wanted to kind of see if we had any questions, comments, ideas on this SARA model. We've got some things online in the Knowledge Center. If anybody on this webinar is not privy to or had access or visited the LPRC Knowledge Center, it's very similar in design out of Google. It is a keyword searchable database. You can find it at the lpresearch.org website. It is the Knowledge Center, but we've got SARA documents. We've got worksheets on there that you can use and adopt for your organization, but we want to highly recommend that. You're going to hear us talk a lot about SARA at the upcoming Impact Conference, October 4th and 5th. There's a reception, of course, on the 3rd, the evening of the 3rd, here at the Innovation Lab. But SARA is a method we believe that each and every one of you at every level of your organization can adopt. You can make it very simple, easy to use, and it's a way to communicate, have a common lexicon or terminology used, but it maintains that evenness, that consistency throughout the organization, regardless of what your people are dealing with, what you're dealing with corporately. But don't just think at one level is our recommendation. Any and everybody in your enterprise can use the SARA model. So I'll go to see if there's anybody on the call or on the webinar or both that might have a question, comment, or suggestion. Okay, crickets. So please go to the LPRC Knowledge Center at lpresearch.org. Call, text, email any of us on the team here at the LPRC. We'd love to walk you through the SARA process. This slide deck and others, including the reports, are all in the Knowledge Center. We'll make sure those are available to you. This webinar also will be on the Knowledge Center if you want to distribute it via link or any other form for your team. We wish everybody on the call and the webinar have a great week, and we're always here for you at the LPRC. Thank you very much.
Hey, Sarah.
How are you?
Good. What's going
on? Not too much.
Go where?
On his way.
Okay.
In case he ends